McCain was, of course, more than a senator. He was a decorated Navy veteran and prisoner of war who was tortured at the hands of his captors in Vietnam. Harry Smith of NBC News has more on McCain's military legacy.
He was John McCain III, the son and grandson of U.S. Navy admirals, but his war was Vietnam. In July 1967, the brash young fighter pilot narrowly escaped death on the deck of the USS Forrestal. A massive fire nearly sank the ship in the Gulf of Tonkin, claiming the lives of more than 100 men. Just 3 months later, while on his 23rd combat mission, McCain's plane was hit by enemy fire.
Yesterday, over Hanoi, 3 American planes were shot down and at least 2 of their pilots captured. One of them was Lieutenant Commander John McCain III, the son of the U.S. naval commander in Europe.
I was hit. I could see that the wing was gone. I ejected from my airplane. I was knocked unconscious by the ejection and injured. My arm's broken, my leg broken.
Dragged from a lake by an angry crowd, McCain was severely wounded and in shock. The Vietnamese denied him medical attention.
I was dumped in a dark cell and left to die.
Then they realized his potential propaganda value.
When they discovered my father was an admiral, they took me to a hospital. They couldn't set my bones properly, so they just slapped a cast on me.
Lieutenant Commander John McCain.
A French film crew was summoned to document the new POW's good treatment.
How old are you? 31.
But McCain refused to cooperate with his captors, even when he was offered the opportunity to go home.
Our code said we could only go home in the order of our capture, and there were men who had been shot down long before me.
It would cost him 2 years in solitary confinement.
It was very severe mistreatment, beatings, broke my arm. It was very serious, and at the time I wasn't in very good physical shape anyway, and it made it a lot worse.
In that time of deprivation and frequent beatings, he would once break during an interrogation, and he would attempt suicide. In all, John McCain would spend 5.5 years as a prisoner of war. Released in 1973, he finally returned home, forever shaped by his experience, but never bitter.
Senator McCain.
Years later, as a senator, working with 2 presidents, he played a key role in restoring relations with Vietnam.
It's very important for us to recognize that the war is over.
John McCain not only survived Vietnam, he made peace with the past.
I put the Vietnam War behind me a long time ago. I harbor no anger nor rancor. I'm a better man for my experience, and I'm grateful for having the opportunity of serving.
His heroes, he always said, were his fellow POWs, his fellow Americans.
I fell in love with my country when I was a prisoner in someone else's. I loved it because it was not just a place, but an idea, a cause worth fighting for. I was never the same again. I wasn't my own man anymore. I was my country's.
Harry Smith, NBC News, New York.
Joining me now is MSNBC military analyst Colonel Jack Jacobs and counterterrorism expert Malcolm Nance. All right, I don't know whether to go with branch of service or rank and decoration. I think I'm going to go with rank and decoration this time. Colonel Jack Jacobs, your thoughts on the passing of John McCain?
Well, there's a big gap now in leadership. He was the kind of person everybody could rely on to be sensible about things, to start at the end and work backwards, think about what the objective is first before you allocate resources. He was the kind of person who taught us a very important and productive way of looking at things, and that is that you can't do anything about yesterday. The only thing you can work on is tomorrow, and you have to dedicate yourself to improving the future. Fulminating about the past gets you absolutely nowhere. And I think he taught that to all of us.
You know, it's interesting that you say that, Colonel Jack, because you know better than most, Vietnam was such a wrenching experience for the country. It was such a divisive issue that it washed over into our politics right through the 1990s. The question of where you stood on the war, whether you opposed the war for John Kerry right through 2004, whether you fought in the war, got deferments. You know, it really used to be the wrenching issue in American politics. John McCain, as somebody who was a POW for 5 years, worked with John John Kerry on normalization of U.S. relations with Vietnam. He was able to overcome not just his personal history, but the American kind of, anxiety about Vietnam.
Well, they were grown-up. They were both Navy, too. I think maybe that has something to do with it. All that notwithstanding, they're both serious about where we're headed. What does it take to get to where we want to go? And one of the things that comes immediately to mind was the fact that the war in Vietnam was very much different than the other wars we had fought, particularly the Second World War, where every household had made a commitment to defend the Republic. I grew up in a neighborhood in New York City where I don't remember a single solitary friend of mine whose father had not been in the war. 20 years later, when we were fighting in Vietnam, it was a selective war. If you were going to college, you didn't have to go to war. If you were married, you didn't have to go to war. We had selective service, and we were very selective about who we picked. Therefore, there was not this common experience that we had in the Second World War, and the people who served became relatively isolated from the rest of the Republic.
Yep.
John McCain's view about all that was that was a bad thing to do, that was a bad place to go, and tried very, very hard and was successful in changing people's attitudes about what service to country really meant.
Yeah, okay. To the Navy man now, Malcolm Nance, your thoughts on the passing of John McCain?
I'm heartbroken. I mean, I had a pretty rough night of it, as you know. Said some tough things on Twitter.
Yeah.
But, I'm a Navy man. I'm a chief. I met John McCain, and the first thing I said to him, I was so excited to see him. I said, I'm a chief. I'm a senior chief. And he goes, everything I've ever learned in the Navy, I learned from a chief. And when I was at the survival school in Coronado, I had read his original pink copy classified debrief of what happened to John McCain in the Hanoi Hilton. That man was treated horribly. He was tortured mercilessly. Admiral Stockdale would come into the school, just wander in, and he would talk about how John McCain was thrown into Calcutta, the little hole that they put in there, and that actually John McCain relieved Admiral Stockdale from that hole. And they called those people tigers, because they would go in there and they would uphold the honor in these horrible conditions of captivity. He survived the Forrestal Fire. Anyone in the Navy knows about the Forrestal Fire, the single largest mass conflagration, even bigger than some in World War II, which sank ships. John McCain was literally in the middle of that explosion as airplanes were flashing around him. This man is a giant, not just in the U.S. Navy. Thank God he will be buried next and near John Paul Jones.
Yeah. I'll tell you something else. If you were to ask him, he said he would say he failed. He had failed. And he failed because, although everybody says that I'm going to resist, I'm going to keep resisting, and they're not going to get anything from me but name, rank, service number, date of birth.
Yeah.
In the end, he was broken. And he was broken because everybody breaks at one point.
Yeah.
And everybody, Malcolm knows and I knew, who were part of that, General Boyd and Jim Stockdale and everybody else who was taught, Bud Day, Leo Thorsness, all said that John McCain was the bravest guy they ever met. Notwithstanding that, John McCain had extremely high standards for his own deportment.
Yep.
And thought that he had failed, but he hadn't failed.
It wasn't about breaking, it was about honor. And this is what we're missing today. This is why we're all sad. A legacy of American honor has just gone. And we're now in a period where we're devoid of honor. Someone has to stand up. Others have to stand up to take this nation's honor back.
Yeah.
And John McCain is gone, and now you have a role model for that.
Yeah. I can't think of two better people to unpack John McCain's military legacy than my two friends here
Well, we
today.
feel very strongly about him and what he left behind.
Absolutely.
God bless him.
And that comes through. Thank you both. Colonel Jack Jacobs, Malcolm Nance, thank you both. God bless you both. Thank you.